As the lights soften and the long day slowly comes to a close, your mind may still be moving, thoughts drifting gently, reluctant to come to a full stop. In moments like this, you do not need more news, nor more stimulation, but a slower rhythm you can rest within. Welcome to Stories for Sleep, a place where scientific stories are told in a calm, quiet way, created especially for the moments before sleep. On this channel, we do not try to make you understand or remember anything. Instead, we allow science to become a gentle current, helping both body and mind gradually let go. In this video, you are listening to the most relaxing facts about plate tectonics to fall asleep, to a slow journey through the almost imperceptible movements of the Earth itself. Deep beneath your feet, tectonic plates drift at an unhurried pace, shaping mountains, oceans, and the steady rhythm of the planet over billions of years. This is not a story meant for learning, but a story meant for rest. You do not need to follow every detail. If you fall asleep partway through, that is completely fine. For now, simply lie still and allow the Earth to whisper you into sleep. As night falls and the sounds of the outer world dissolve into quiet, many of us remain awake, not because there is more to do, but because the mind refuses to settle. Thoughts keep moving, vague worries linger, and there is a sense that something within is still shifting even as the body lies still. Carl Gustav Jung once suggested that people do not lose sleep because they lack tiredness, but because consciousness has become disconnected from the deeper rhythms of nature, rhythms the unconscious still remembers. We live on a planet that is always in motion, yet we have grown accustomed to believing that stillness is what keeps us safe. We fear change, fear movement, fear processes we cannot control, and when night arrives, that fear itself prevents the mind from resting. The paradox is this: the Earth has never been still, and it is precisely because of this movement that life has been possible at all. This video was created for moments like these, when you need something deep enough to calm the mind, yet gentle enough not to pull you back into wakefulness. Instead of resisting movement, we will listen to it. Instead of worrying about change, we will experience it as the planet's slow, steady breath. Plate tectonics may sound dry, technical, distant, but in truth it is one of the most soothing stories the Earth can tell. Massive continental plates drift more slowly than fingernails grow. Currents of material deep within the planet move quietly over millions of years. No urgency, no noise, no need for attention. And yet it is these nearly imperceptible movements that have raised mountains, opened oceans, regulated climate, and kept this planet alive long enough for humans to appear. Jung believed that at the deepest level of the psyche, human beings are not seeking control, but trust in an order larger than the ego. When we understand that there are systems which move slowly, endure, and regulate themselves, the mind begins to relax. Plate tectonics is a perfect symbol of this truth. No central controller, no guiding hand, only a dynamic balance sustained across spans of time far longer than any civilization. In this video, you will hear the most relaxing facts about plate tectonics, not to study, not to remember, but simply to feel. You will hear about Earth as a planet that has never stood still, about tectonic plates as the quiet, central machinery of the world, about the cycles of creation and destruction within the Earth's crust, where destruction is not an end, but a condition for renewal. You will hear about ancient heat deep within the planet, still gently pushing and pulling the plates, about how water, carbon, and life itself are cycled through volcanoes and subduction zones, about how drifting continents have shaped climate and biological evolution. And finally, you will be invited to see the Earth as a self-regulating being rather than an inert rock. Yet the greatest value of this journey is not knowledge. It is the sense of safety these slow stories provide. When you realize that the Earth has been regulating itself for billions of years, your mind may allow itself to stop trying to control everything for a few short hours tonight. Jung described this as the moment when the ego steps back and the whole is allowed to speak, and it is in that moment that sleep can arrive. You do not need to fully understand plate tectonics. You do not need to follow every detail. If you drift off midway, that is perfectly fine. In fact, that is exactly the purpose of this video. These truths are told not to keep you awake, but to return you to the slow, reliable movement of the planet beneath you. Now that you are here, allow yourself to do nothing more. No need to try to relax. No need to force sleep. Simply listen and let these stories of the quietly moving Earth pass through you like continental plates drifting beneath deep oceans, slow, steady, enduring, and trustworthy. And when you are ready, we will begin this journey with a very simple truth. The Earth has never been still, and you do not need to hold your mind still anymore. 1. The Earth is never still. When we lie down at night, the first feeling that often arises is the wish for everything to stop. The day has passed, the body is tired, the mind longs for stillness. We want the world to be motionless, even if only for a few short hours. But there is a truth that is both gentle and profound, one we rarely consider. Even in that deepest quiet, the Earth is still moving, not through violent shaking, not through changes we can easily see, but through movements so slow that the human mind can barely perceive them. The surface of the planet you are lying on is not a single solid rock. It is divided into enormous tectonic plates, vast foundations that carry continents, oceans, mountains, and even the cities where humans live. These plates drift slowly atop a softer layer beneath them, like immense water lilies floating on deep, heavy, silent currents. Each year they move only a few centimeters, slower than the growth of a fingernail, slower than almost any change we notice in daily life. And it is precisely this slowness that allows the mind to relax. Carl Gustav Jung believed that at the deepest level of the unconscious, human beings trust slow movements. What moves too fast keeps consciousness alert. What is too forceful awakens defensive instincts. But what is slow, steady, and rhythmic, like the heartbeat, the breath, or the motion of the Earth, brings a very ancient sense of safety. We often think of the Earth as a stable, unmoving foundation upon which everything else happens. But the truth is this: it is because the Earth never stands still that it can be a foundation for life at all. Mountains do not rise in an instant. Oceans do not open overnight. Everything is shaped by movements lasting tens or hundreds of millions of years, slow enough not to destroy, yet steady enough to renew. When two tectonic plates collide, they do not crash like rigid objects. They press against one another slowly, patiently. The crust compresses, bends, and lifts little by little until mountains emerge. The Himalayas, among the highest places on Earth, are still growing today, not through violence, but through the patience of time. Elsewhere, plates drift apart. Hot material from deep within the Earth rises, cools, and forms new crust. Oceans widen, not because of decisions, but because of steady, continuous motion. And in other places, still one plate quietly sinks beneath, another melts, is recycled, and becomes part of a deeper cycle. In all of these movements, nothing is wasted. Nothing is ever completely discarded. Destruction and creation are simply two phases of the same rhythm. Jung referred to this as the principle of wholeness within a living system. Nothing happens in isolation or without meaning. Even what we call rupture or earthquake is not a mistake of the planet, but a release of energy necessary for balance to continue. Viewed through the lens of depth psychology, plate tectonics begins to look familiar. The Earth resembles a living mind. The surface where humans dwell is like consciousness, visible, ordered, seemingly stable. Beneath it lie deeper, hotter, slower currents, like the unconscious, where energy accumulates, transforms, and gradually shapes what appears above. And just as in the human psyche, what happens below cannot be forced to stop. When suppressed for too long, it will find a way to release itself. The Earth does not resist this. It allows movement to happen according to its own rhythm. There is a deep comfort in realizing this before sleep. Even when you cannot control everything, a larger system is still functioning. You do not need to hold the world still to be safe. You do not need to keep everything within reach in order to rest. The Earth is drifting, and it has been doing so for billions of years. The earthquakes we fear are only brief blinks within an immensely long movement. Most of the time, this planet drifts in silence, and that silence is its natural state. Jung once suggested that much of modern anxiety arises from identifying with waking consciousness for too long. When consciousness refuses to rest, everything feels fragile. But when we allow ourselves to drift into a deeper layer, just as the Earth allows its plates to drift, the mind begins to soften. Imagine right now beneath the place where you are lying, tens of kilometers below the tectonic plates are still moving. Not because you are awake or asleep, not because you are anxious or relaxed. They continue slowly and steadily without needing anyone's attention. Life does not depend on your tension. It depends on deeper rhythms. And in this moment, you are allowed to let go, to entrust stability to the Earth, to entrust movement to time, to entrust wakefulness to tomorrow. If your mind still feels active, that is not wrong. The Earth too never stands still, yet it is never in a hurry. And when you allow your thoughts to drift without holding on to them, you are doing what this planet has done for billions of years, moving without resistance. Tonight, you do not need to be perfectly still. You only need to drift very slowly with the Earth. And this is the first truth and also the gentlest one. The Earth is never still. And because of that, you can rest in safety. In the previous part, we allowed a gentle truth to enter the mind. The Earth is never still. Even in your deepest stillness, the planet beneath you continues its slow, steady, enduring drift, unhurried, unobserved, unasked. And once we accept that the Earth is always moving, a deeper and quieter question begins to arise, not as a scientific inquiry, but as a profoundly human curiosity. If everything is moving, what keeps the world from falling apart? What keeps mountains from dissolving, oceans from vanishing, and life stable enough to sleep through the night? The answer does not lie on the surface. It lies within a quiet, slow, almost invisible system, plate tectonics, the central machinery of the planet. Part 2. Plate tectonics as the central machinery of the planet. Human beings often imagine a machine as something loud, gears spinning rapidly, engines roaring, energy bursting outward. But the Earth's machinery is different. It makes no sound. It does not accelerate. It has no control center. It operates more slowly than any clock humanity has ever built. Tectonic plates are never in a hurry. They do not compete for space. They simply fulfill their roles within a system far larger than themselves. And because of this, they become the most enduring machine we know. All forms on Earth are the result of movement. No mountain on Earth exists because it was placed there. The Himalayas were not erected like a structure. The Mariana Trench is not a random depression. Mid-ocean ridges are not ripples on the seafloor. The San Andreas Fault is not an accidental crack. All of them are traces of movement. When plates collide, the ground wrinkles, lifts, and slowly rises into mountains. When plates separate, hot material rises and creates new oceans. When plates slide past one another, energy builds and releases, forming earthquakes. When one plate sinks beneath another, it melts, is recycled, and returns to a deeper cycle. There is no part of the Earth's surface that is truly still. There are only movements so slow that we have grown accustomed to calling them motionless. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, "There is no change from darkness to light or from inertia to movement without emotion. There is no transformation from stillness to motion without deep energy." Plate tectonics is that deep energy of the planet. Without plate tectonics, Earth would be flat, static, and nearly lifeless. Imagine an Earth without plate tectonics. No mountains, which means no weathering to create minerals. No volcanoes, which means no replenishment of gases and water at the surface. No crustal recycling, which means carbon locked away forever. No stable ocean currents, which means extreme climates. A flat, silent, motionless planet. Many other planets in our solar system have reached this state. not because they were unlucky, but because they lack a self-regulating machine. Earth is different. It does not preserve everything intact. It allows breakdown so that renewal can occur. Jung described this as a principle of psychological life. A personality that never changes is a personality that has died. In Modern Man in Search of a Soul, he wrote, "Life demands for its completion and fulfillment a balance between opposites. Plate tectonics is precisely this balance between construction and destruction, stability and change, holding on and letting go. A machine without a center, and that is why it endures. There is no control panel for plate tectonics. No place issues commands to the plates. No central authority. This system regulates itself. If energy accumulates too much in one place, it releases. If one region cools, convection patterns shift. If one ocean opens, another slowly closes." Jung saw this same structure in a healthy human psyche. Not the ego controlling everything, but the self. The totality of the psyche balancing opposing forces. In Aeon, he wrote, "The self is a union of opposites. Wholeness is the integration of what appears opposed." Plate tectonics as the planet's unconscious. The Earth's surface resembles consciousness, the realm where we live, build, name, and control. Plate tectonics resembles the unconscious. It happens beneath the surface. It does not need to be seen, yet it determines the shape of everything above. You do not see the unconscious, but you live within its consequences. In the same way, humans do not feel tectonic plates moving, yet your home rests upon them. The climate you breathe depends on them. Human history has been shaped by them. Slow movement is what calms the nervous system. There is the reason why stories about plate tectonics are suited for listening before sleep, because there is no urgency, no immediate threat, nothing that must be done right now. Everything unfolds on a timescale longer than a human life. Jung believed that anxiety dissolves when the ego is no longer the center of time. When you realize that systems exist which move far more slowly than you do, you no longer feel responsible for holding everything together. Humans fear movement because they equate it with loss of control. But the Earth reveals a different truth. Movement is not the opposite of stability. Movement is the condition for stability. A plate forced to remain completely still would accumulate energy until it shattered. A mind forced into rigid stillness does the same. Jung believed sleep arrives when the ego stops trying to keep everything fixed. When you lie down, this machinery is still working. Right now, plates are still drifting. The mantle is still convecting. New crust is still forming. Old crust is still being recycled without you needing to stay awake, without you needing to understand, without you needing to intervene. The stability of the world does not depend on your alertness. The deepest comfort of plate tectonics, it is not knowledge, it is not scientific fact. It is this: there are systems far larger than you quietly keeping the rhythm of the world. And because of that, you are allowed to rest. Before sleep, let this idea remain. The Earth does not need to be still in order to be safe. It is safe because it knows how to move, and your mind is the same. Plate tectonics is not merely a geological detail. It is the slow heart of the planet. It does not beat fast. It is not loud, but it has never stopped. And when you listen to that rhythm, even through words alone, the mind begins to remember. You do not need to control everything in order to be safe. There are deeper rhythms holding you. In the previous part, we sensed plate tectonics as a quiet yet enduring machine without a control center, without supervision, yet still keeping the world from collapsing. A system so slow that you can safely place your sleep upon it. And once you trust that this machinery exists, a deeper truth slowly reveals itself, not through fear, but through a gentle realization. This machinery does not only create the world, it continuously destroys and renews the world as well. But this destruction does not wear the face of catastrophe. It carries the rhythm of a living cycle. Part 3. the cycle of creation and destruction of the Earth's crust. If there is one thing that plate tectonics whispers very softly to human beings before sleep, it is this: no life exists without passing through destruction. The Earth's crust, the surface on which we live, build, and record history, is not an unchanging entity. It is continuously being born and continuously being recycled, not according to human intention, not according to morality, only according to the planet's deep rhythm. In the middle of the oceans, where two tectonic plates drift apart, hot material from deep within the Earth rises upward. As it cools, it becomes new oceanic crust. This process unfolds slowly, steadily, without display, yet it has never stopped for hundreds of millions of years. Every day the Earth gives birth to itself, but elsewhere the opposite movement is taking place. Old oceanic crust, heavier, colder, and denser, gradually sinks beneath another plate at subduction zones. It is pulled downward, heated, melted, and becomes part of the mantle once more. Oceanic crust does not die. It is returned to the place from which it was born. Within this cycle there is no judgment, no regret, no concept of should or should not. There is only continuation. Carl Gustav Jung recognized this principle not only in nature, but in the very structure of the human psyche. In Psychology and Alchemy, he wrote, "In the process of individuation, destruction and construction go hand in hand. In the process of becoming oneself, destruction and creation always move together. Oceanic crust, the part that is always ready to let go. Oceanic crust is young, it is thin, it is dense, and it is not born to last forever. No piece of oceanic crust on Earth is older than about 200 million years. On the scale of the planet, this is only a blink of an eye. Oceanic crust carries the quality of readiness to depart." Jung might have described this as the part of the psyche that does not cling. The part that understands its value lies in its role, not in permanence. When oceanic crust sinks, it carries with it water, carbon, minerals, and the chemical memory of the surface. All of this is delivered into a deeper cycle where future life will need it. Continents, the keepers of memory. In contrast to oceanic crust, continents are lighter, thicker, and more durable. They do not subduct easily, and so they become the keepers of the Earth's memory. Within continental rocks, we can find traces of ancient oceans, atmospheres that no longer exist, organisms long gone. Continents are the planet's long-term memory. Jung described a similar function in the psyche as the capacity to retain meaning. Not every experience is preserved, but what is essential to identity remains. In Memories, Dreams, Reflections, he wrote, "The greater the tension between pairs of opposites, the greater the potential." It is precisely the difference between oceanic crust that knows how to let go and continents that know how to retain that creates the planet's vitality. Destruction is not a flaw in the system. Human beings often view destruction through a moral lens. What is broken is bad. But plate tectonics tells a different story. Without subduction, carbon would accumulate, climate would fall out of balance, oceans would become toxic. Destruction is a condition of balance. Jung believed that much psychological suffering does not arise from loss itself, but from the refusal to allow loss to occur. When a part of the psyche has fulfilled its role, but is not released, it becomes a burden. The cycle of creation and destruction as a very long breath, born, drifting, melting, returning, no clear beginning, no absolute end. The Earth breathes through its own crust. Each breath lasts tens of millions of years. And because this rhythm is so long, it does not provoke fear. It creates a deep sense of stability. Jung believed that sleep comes when the mind accepts that it does not need to cling to every old form. Listening to this before sleep, you may not clearly picture mid-ocean ridges. You do not need to. What matters more is the feeling. Not everything that disappears is a loss. Not every ending is a mistake. The Earth remains alive because it knows how to recycle itself. And your mind is the same. This cycle is happening right now as you are listening. New crust is being formed. Old crust is being returned. Matter is transforming. The system is self-regulating. Without your alertness, without your worry, the world does not need you to stay awake in order to continue. The deepest comfort of the creation-destruction cycle. It is not geological knowledge. It is this truth: you do not need to hold on to everything in order to keep living. There are parts of you like oceanic crust, born to fulfill their role and then let go. There are other parts like continents that remain carrying deeper meaning. Jung called this the process of psychological maturation. Before sleep, let this idea remain. The earth is not afraid of melting because it knows it will return, and so are you. The cycle of creation and destruction of the earth's crust is not a story of loss. It is a story of deep trust in continuation. And as you allow this story to settle within you, perhaps your mind is quietly whispering, I do not need to cling to everything. There are deeper rhythms keeping me safe. In the previous part, we gently passed through a very kind truth. The Earth's crust is continuously born and continuously returned, in a cycle without tragedy, without judgment, only continuation. Life does not endure by clinging to old forms, but by knowing how to melt at the right moment. But if this cycle of creation and destruction is the planet's breath, then a deeper question begins to emerge, like a distant wave in the night. What keeps this breath from ever stopping? What prevents the earth from cooling into silence, from becoming a motionless stone? Like so many other worlds, the answer lies very deep, deeper than the crust, deeper than anything human hands have ever reached. It is heat. Part 4. Heat from deep within the earth is the engine of all movement. The heat within the earth is not a violent flame. It does not blaze. It does not roar. It exists like a very ancient warmth, a lingering memory from the time this planet was formed, when matter collided, compressed, melted, and crystallized. Billions of years have passed, yet a portion of that heat remains, not because it strives to endure, but because there is no reason for it to disappear too quickly. Alongside this residual heat, the radioactive decay of elements deep within the Earth continues to release energy very slowly, very steadily. Not powerful enough to tear the planet apart, but sufficient to keep it alive. The Earth does not move because it is pushed from the outside. It moves because it still retains warmth within. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, "The unconscious is not just evil by nature, it is also the source of the highest good. The unconscious is not merely darkness, it is also the deepest source of energy. The heat within the earth is the same. It does not appear on the surface, yet all movement above begins there. Convection currents, movement without purpose. Within the Earth's mantle, heat causes material to become warmer, lighter, and to rise. As it cools, it becomes heavier and sinks. This process creates immense convection currents so slow that a single circulation can take tens of millions of years. No one controls these flows. There is no map. There is no plan. They move because movement is the most natural thing to do. Jung perceived a similar principle in the human psyche. He believed that the deepest movements of the mind do not arise from willpower, but from the self-regulating energy of the whole. In Psychological Types, he wrote, "Energy never stands still." The convection currents within the Earth are the physical truth of this statement. Slow currents shape the world. Convection currents do not build mountains overnight. They do not open oceans within a human lifetime. They do not alter the map of the world within our memory. Yet precisely because they do not hurry, they accomplish what violent movements cannot. They maintain the planet's form across immense spans of time. These currents pull plates apart, push plates together, lift hot material to create hotspots, nourish volcanoes and supervolcanoes. The world is shaped not by sudden force, but by patient pressure. Jung believed psychological maturity also arises not from dramatic moments, but from very slow inner movements, sometimes only recognized in hindsight. Volcanoes, where heat, reaches the surface. When heat from deep within the earth finds a path upward, it does not always destroy. Often it builds. Volcanoes create new land, new islands, new minerals, new environments for life. Life on land might never have existed if the earth had not learned to erupt. Jung wrote in Symbols of Transformation, "The symbol is the transformer of energy. A symbol is where energy is transformed. A volcano is the same. It does not merely release heat, it transforms heat into new forms of the world." Supervolcanoes and human fear. Humans tend to fear words like supervolcano because they evoke loss of control. But viewed on the planet's timescale, such events are rare moments within a very long history. Most of the time, heat is released gently. Supervolcanoes are not the essence of the system, but safety valves when energy has accumulated for too long. Jung believed that major psychological crises are similar, not signs of a broken system, but of energy compressed for too long without transformation. Heat does not disappear, it only changes form. The most comforting truth in the story of Earth's heat is this: it does not need to be preserved through effort. Heat is not managed. It finds its own paths. It disperses itself. It transforms itself. There is no central control, yet there is deep balance. Jung called this the functioning of the self, the total psyche, where opposing forces regulate themselves without intervention from the ego. The earth does not cool because it does not resist itself. Many other planets cooled quickly because their internal flows ceased. The earth is different. It remains warm because it allows heat to move. Jung warned that a mind that attempts to freeze its emotions becomes rigid and suffers. A mind that allows energy to flow even slowly remains alive. Listening to this before sleep, you may be thinking about heat, the Earth's interior, convection currents. But what matters is not the imagery, it is the feeling. There is a deep source of energy beneath you working on your behalf. You do not need to keep the world warm. You do not need to maintain movement. You do not need to stay awake for things to continue. Heat as an image of the unconscious. Heat within the earth cannot be seen. The unconscious within the mind is the same. Yet, without heat, the earth dies. Without the unconscious, the psyche is depleted. Jung wrote in The Undiscovered Self, "Man's unconscious is not empty. It is full of energy." Before sleep, let this idea remain. The earth does not need to strive in order to keep moving. It only needs not to block its own flow. And so do you. Heat from deep within the earth is not a threat. It is the planet's warm heart. It does not beat quickly. It is not loud, but it has never gone out. And as you allow this warm rhythm to settle into your mind, perhaps a very deep part of you is whispering, "I do not need to keep everything running." There are deeper sources of energy doing that. In the previous part, we touched a very deep force heat, the ancient warmth that has never gone out within the earth. This heat sets matter in motion, creating slow, patient convection currents that quietly pull and push tectonic plates, keeping the planet from becoming cold and silent. But heat alone is not enough to create a world with oceans, an atmosphere, and life. Heat needs something to transform flows, to distribute it, and matter to carry the rhythm of life. And this is where another cycle, also slow, also deep, also nearly invisible, enters the story. The cycle of water and carbon. Part 5. Water, carbon, and life are circulated through plate tectonics. If we had to name two humble elements that nevertheless determine the fate of life on Earth, they would be water and carbon. They are not loud. They do not seek attention. They do not demand to be noticed. Yet without either one of them, all complex life would disappear. What is remarkable is this Earth does not preserve water and carbon by locking them tightly at the surface. Instead, the planet continuously sends them downward into its depths and then returns them again like a very long, very steady breath. Tectonic plates serve as the silent carriers in this cycle. When the ocean enters the Earth, At subduction zones where one tectonic plate slides beneath another, it is not only rock that is pulled downward. Along with it, go water bound within minerals, carbon locked inside sediments, compounds that once belonged to the surface. The ocean, in a very real sense, is flowing into the earth, not as rushing streams of liquid water, but as molecules held captive within stone, carrying the chemical memory of the atmosphere and surface life. Carl Gustav Jung wrote in Psychology and Alchemy, "Water is the commonest symbol for the unconscious. Water is the most universal symbol of the unconscious. In Earth's story, water plays the same role. It descends into unseen depths, and from there determines everything that happens above. When volcanoes return, what was taken, water and carbon, are not lost when they descend into the earth. They simply change roles. As subducted material heats up, water is released, lowering the melting point of rock. Magma forms, rises, and eventually escapes through volcanoes. Volcanoes do not only erupt lava, they return water and carbon to the surface. Through this process, water vapor is replenished in the atmosphere. The oceans are sustained. Carbon dioxide is supplied at levels sufficient to keep Earth warm. Jung believed that unconscious energy, when properly transformed, becomes a source of life rather than destruction. He wrote in Symbols of Transformation, "The transformation of libido is the source of all renewal." Volcanoes are where Earth performs this transformation. The carbon cycle, the climate's regulating valve. Carbon is a double-edged blade. Too little, and Earth freezes. Too much, and Earth becomes a furnace. Plate tectonics helps the planet avoid both extremes. When too much carbon accumulates in the atmosphere, weathering increases. Carbon is drawn into sediments. Sediments are subducted. When carbon becomes too scarce, volcanoes release CO2. The greenhouse effect is restored. There is no force, central manager, yet there is long-term balance. Jung called this state self-regulation, the natural balancing of the psyche as a whole. In The Structure and Dynamics of the Psyche, he wrote, "The psyche is a self-regulating system. The Earth is the same. Why Earth is different from Venus? Venus is similar in size to Earth. It may once have had water. It may once have had a temperate climate. But Venus does not have long-term active plate tectonics. Carbon accumulated in its atmosphere. Heat was not regulated. The greenhouse effect passed a critical threshold. A planet that loses circulation loses its capacity for life. This is not only true in geology. Jung believed that a mind that can no longer send energy into the depths and bring back meaning will fall into crisis. Water, the softener of all extremes. Water softens rock, slows reactions, cools heat. Without water, plate tectonics would be more rigid. Volcanic behavior would be different. Climate would be harsher. Water is what keeps Earth from becoming extreme. Jung viewed water as a symbol of feeling connection and adaptability qualities that prevent humans from becoming trapped in psychological opposites. A cycle longer than any human life. The water-carbon cycle does not complete within a generation, not within a civilization, not within an era. It unfolds over hundreds of millions of years, and because it is so long, it brings a sense of safety. There is nothing urgent, nothing that must be fixed immediately. Jung believed that anxiety dissolves when humans step out of the ego's short sense of time. When listening to such vast cycles, the mind naturally slows. Listening to this before sleep, you may not clearly imagine how carbon travels into the earth. That is perfectly fine. What matters is the feeling. Life is not as fragile as we often think. It is supported by very deep cycles. You do not need to keep the world in balance. There are larger circulations doing that for you. Water and carbon as images of emotion and meaning. In Jungian psychology, water symbolizes emotion. Carbon symbolizes matter, structure, and foundation. If emotions are not carried downward and transformed, they evaporate into chaos. If structure is not softened, it becomes rigid. Earth teaches us this. Everything must circulate. Before sleep, let this idea remain. Earth does not hold water and carbon in one place. It lets them go, and then welcomes them back. And your mind can do the same. Water and carbon are not minor details of life. They are the planet's slow bloodstream. They descend to deepen the system. They return to nourish the surface. And as you listen to this story in the night, perhaps a very deep part of you is whispering, I do not need to hold on to everything. There are cycles that care for life on my behalf. In the previous part, we felt a very deep cycle. Water and carbon do not remain still. Earth carries them into the depths and returns them to the surface, keeping the climate from becoming extreme, the oceans from drying up, and life supplied with time to continue. But as water and carbon circulate, as heat quietly flows, as tectonic plates continue to drift, something else is also unfolding, very slowly, far beyond the span of a human lifetime. Climate is being shaped, and along with it, life is learning how to change. Not by decision, not by intention, but through movements that stretch across tens, hundreds of millions of years. Part 6. Plate tectonics shapes climate and biological evolution. Humans often think of climate as something that simply happens to the Earth, like an extended state of weather. But when we look more deeply, climate is the result of the planet's shape, the position of continents, the opening and closing of oceans, the rise of mountains and the spread of plains. And all of those forms are products of plate tectonics. Plate tectonics does not directly create life, but it creates the conditions in which life learns how to change. Carl Gustav Jung wrote, "In the development of personality, life is a process of becoming, not a static state." Plate tectonics is precisely this process of becoming for the Earth. Drifting continents. When climate no longer stands still, as continents drift across different latitudes, regions that were once warm become cold, places that were once dry become humid, ice ages expand and retreat. No organism lives forever within a single climate. Plate tectonics forces life to move, adapt, transform. Jung believed that human maturity also arises through changes in circumstance that we do not control. These shifts compel the psyche to expand. Ocean currents, the bloodstream of climate. The position of continents determines how oceans circulate. When oceans are wide and open, heat is dispersed. Climates become milder. When oceans narrow or close, currents change. Climates grow more extreme. Water carries heat across the planet, and plate tectonics determines water's pathways. Jung saw here a familiar psychological image. Emotions remain healthy only when they circulate, rather than becoming isolated. Mountains. When rock reshapes wind and rain. When plates collide and mountains rise, winds are blocked, rainfall shifts, deserts form, forests emerge elsewhere. A single mountain range can alter the destiny of an entire continent. Jung believed that the psyche also contains such mountain ranges, deep structures formed through inner collisions that redirect the flow of emotion and thought. Continental separation. When isolation creates diversity, when continents drift apart, organisms become isolated. Genes no longer mix, evolution accelerates. Isolation is not always impoverishment. Sometimes it is the condition for creativity. Jung wrote in Psychological Types, individuation is a process of differentiation. Plate tectonics brought about the individuation of the living world. When climate changes, life does not resist, it learns. Life does not protest ice ages. It does not rebel against drought. It does not demand permanent stability. It learns how to live within new conditions. Jung believed that a healthy psyche is not one that never changes, but one that can adapt to adversity. Extinction, a dark but necessary phase. Plate tectonics sometimes leads to rapid climate shifts, disappearing habitats, mass extinctions. But extinction is not the end of life. It is the space into which the new can emerge. Jung wrote in The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, every form of life requires the death of other forms. Biodiversity, the result of long-term instability. If Earth were completely stable, no ice ages, no new mountains, no opening or closing oceans, life would be monotonous. Biodiversity arises from an unfixed climate, constantly changing terrain, environments that continually challenge life. Plate tectonics is the silent conductor of this symphony. Humans are products of this cycle. Without plate tectonics, there would be no long-term climate stability, no biological diversity, no conditions for intelligence to develop. Humans do not stand outside this process. We are its result. Jung emphasized that the human psyche carries the imprint of an evolutionary history far older than civilization itself. Why these truths help us fall asleep? Because they diminish the ego, stretch the sense of time, place humans within a greater flow. When we are no longer the center, anxiety naturally softens. Jung called this the experience of the self, the whole that transcends the ego. Before sleep, let this idea remain. Climate was not designed for you. It formed over hundreds of millions of years, and life, including you, learned how to exist within it. Plate tectonics does not write the future of life. It continuously reshapes the stage. And upon that stage, life learns how to transform, diversify, continue. As you listen to this story in the night, perhaps a very deep part of you is breathing more slowly and whispering, "I do not need an unchanging world to feel safe. I was born into a world that knows how to change." In the previous part, we quietly recognize something essential. Plate tectonics does not merely shape climate or create biodiversity. It also shapes the rhythm of change that life must learn to follow. No environment lasts forever. No form remains unchanged. And within this long-lasting instability, life learns the art of transformation. But when we look long enough, far enough, another feeling begins to arise. Not anxiety, but a deep calm. These changes are not chaotic, they repeat. Not in identical detail, but in the same rhythm. Part 7. The past, present, and future of the Earth form a repeating cycle. If human beings could step outside their own time, away from calendars, clocks, and personal memory, and look at the Earth from the distance of hundreds of millions of years, history would no longer appear as a straight line. We would see cycles. Supercontinents form. Supercontinents break apart. Oceans open. Oceans close. Climates warm. Climates cool. Life flourishes. Life contracts, and then it all begins again, unhurried, undisturbed, as if the Earth were remembering itself. Carl Gustav Jung described this mode of operation as the cyclical nature of the collective unconscious. In The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, he wrote, "The unconscious is not a static entity, but a dynamic process. The Earth is the same. Supercontinents, the planet's dream of wholeness. In Earth's history, the continents have not always been separated as they are today. Many times they have merged into supercontinents, vast landmasses covering much of the planet's surface. Pangaea was not the only one. Before it came, Rodinia, Columbia, and perhaps others whose names have been lost to geological memory. The Earth tends to gather itself together and then to separate again. Jung recognized a deep psychological image in this pattern. Human beings, too, move toward unity, toward wholeness, and then differentiate again in order to develop individuality. In Aeon, he wrote, "Individuation does not shut one out from the world, but gathers the world to itself. Supercontinents are the Earth's moments of gathering, breakup, the condition for diversity. When a supercontinent endures too long, its interior becomes dry, climate grows imbalanced, biological diversity declines, and then, without decision or intention, fragmentation begins. Plates drift apart. Oceans open. New currents form. Climates differentiate. Breakup is not the failure of unity. It is the next phase of the cycle. Jung believed that a psyche seeking only wholeness without allowing differentiation becomes impoverished. Life requires both. Oceans, the planet's moving memory. Every ocean has an age. Some are young, some are old, some are slowly closing. The Atlantic is opening. The Pacific is shrinking. Even now, the map of the world is changing, though we cannot feel it. Jung wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, "We live in time, but time lives in us. Oceans are how the earth lives within time. The present, only a thin slice. National borders, wall maps, geographic names. All of these are true only for this moment. In tens of millions of years, continents will be elsewhere, climates will differ, oceans will change shape. This is not frightening, it is liberating." Jung believed that much human anxiety comes from treating the present as permanent. When we recognize ourselves as living within a thin slice of a vast flow, the mind relaxes. The future, written by very slow movement. Nothing in plate tectonics happens abruptly. The future of the Earth is being written by a few centimeters per year. Millions of years of patience. What happens quickly is usually superficial. What shapes the long term is always slow. Jung saw slowness as the mark of deep processes. The unconscious does not hurry. Cycles, not meaningless repetition. A cycle does not mean everything returns exactly the same. Each return carries difference, experience, traces of what came before. The Earth does not repeat itself. It remembers itself anew. Jung called this the return of the archetype, never identical yet always familiar. Human beings within the cycle. Humans often believe they stand outside geological cycles, but in truth, civilization exists within climatic margins. Human history depends on continental positions. Our future is tied to very slow movement. We do not stand above the cycle, we lie within it. Jung emphasized that when people recognize themselves as part of a larger order, the mind becomes less frightened of death and change. Why this understanding helps us fall asleep? Because it diminishes personal worry, stretches our sense of time, places life within a deep rhythm. Nothing you are worrying about is more important than the planet's cycles. And this does not make you insignificant, it means you are being held. Before sleep, let this idea remain. What you see today is not the final state of the world. And what you are feeling now is not the final state of you. The past, present, and future of the Earth are not separate. They are continuous waves. Supercontinents come and go. Oceans open and close. Life disappears and returns in other forms. And throughout this vast cycle, the Earth has never hurried. It has always had time. As you lie down and listen to this story, perhaps a very deep part of you is breathing more slowly and whispering, "I do not need to understand the whole future. I only need to rest in this moment." In the previous part, we viewed the Earth from the distance of hundreds of millions of years. From there, past, present, and future no longer appear as separate points, but as successive waves. Supercontinents merge and break apart. Oceans open and close. There is no final state, only continuation. And when we look long enough, deeply enough into these cycles, a very quiet feeling begins to form, not knowledge, but trust. The Earth does not merely change. It knows how to keep itself from collapsing while it changes. At that moment, we touch upon a very ancient idea, one that lies close to humanity's earliest intuition: the Earth as a living being. Part 8. The Earth as a self-regulating living whole. In the language of modern science, the Earth is described through systems: the geological system, the atmospheric system, the biological system, the hydrological system. But when these systems are viewed together over a long enough span of time, they no longer resemble separate components. They resemble a body without consciousness in the human sense, without will, without moral intention, yet with one thing that is unmistakably present: the capacity for self-regulation. Through plate tectonics, the Earth releases excess heat, recycles crust and material, circulates water and carbon, regulates the atmosphere, maintains temperatures within the limits required for life. There is no command center yet. There is long-term balance. Carl Gustav Jung referred to this mode of functioning as an expression of the self, the living totality that transcends the ego. In The Undiscovered Self, he wrote, "The self is not only the center, but also the circumference of the whole personality. In this sense, the Earth operates like a planetary self, releasing heat, like a very slow heartbeat. If the Earth did not release heat, it would become too hot inside and frozen at the surface. Plate tectonics allows heat to escape gradually through volcanoes, ridges, and convection, not too fast to destroy, not too slow to fade away." Jung believed that a healthy psyche is not one without intense emotions, but one with an appropriate rhythm of energy release. Energy suppressed for too long erupts. Energy transformed steadily nourishes the personality. Recycling matter, no waste in nature. Within plate tectonics, old crust is not discarded. Material is not thrown away. Everything is returned to the cycle. There is no concept of useless in this system. Jung believed that in psychology, rejected parts, the shadow, when reintegrated into the whole, become valuable sources of energy. In Aeon, he wrote, "What we do not make conscious appears in our lives as fate. The Earth has no sudden fate because it recycles everything, regulating the atmosphere, the subtlety of balance. The Earth's atmosphere is not perfectly stable. It fluctuates, but it fluctuates within livable limits. Carbon is not locked away forever. Water is not lost entirely. Heat does not cross irreversible thresholds, at least for most of Earth's history. This is not luck. It is the result of long-term self-regulation. Jung called this psychological homeostasis, the dynamic balance of opposing forces. Why the Earth lives while many worlds fall silent. Mars cooled too quickly. Venus lost its ability to regulate carbon. The Moon no longer has internal energy, not because they were wrong, but because they lacked certain self-regulating cycles. The Earth is different. It has never been perfect, but it has been flexible enough to adapt to itself. Jung believed that psychological life does not require perfection. It requires the ability to correct and continue. The Earth does not know it is alive, and that is why it lives. The Earth does not reflect on itself. It does not worry. It does not try to maintain an image. It has no ego. And precisely because it has no ego, it does not become trapped in excessive control, fear of change, attachment to old forms. Jung believed that while the human ego is necessary, when it dominates the whole psyche, it disrupts self-regulation. Human beings, the conscious layer of a larger unconscious system. Humans are the only beings on Earth who know they are living on Earth. But this does not place us outside the system. We are a very thin layer of consciousness within a very vast living whole. Jung wrote in Man and His Symbols, "Man is not complete when he lives only in consciousness." Recognizing the Earth as a living whole allows the human ego to soften its voice. Why this idea is especially fitting before sleep, because sleep is the moment when the ego steps back, when control is temporarily released, when we trust that the body knows how to breathe, that the heart knows how to beat. Sleep is an act of surrender. When we hear of a planet that knows how to regulate itself, the mind is reminded that not everything requires conscious intervention. Not every movement needs to be monitored. The Earth is an image of the self. The self, according to Jung, is non-partial, unhurried, free from moralizing. Yet it keeps the whole from collapsing. So does the Earth. Before sleep, let this idea remain. The Earth has kept itself alive through ice ages, asteroid impacts, mass extinctions, and it has done so without needing to be awake. The Earth is not a cold machine, nor is it a conscious being like a human. It is a self-regulating whole, not fast, not perfect, but deep enough and resilient enough. And as you lie here in the night listening to this story, perhaps a very deep part of you is whispering, I do not need to keep everything running. There are larger systems doing that. As this story draws toward its end, you may notice that we have not truly been speaking about rocks, tectonic plates, or deep movements within the Earth. We have been speaking about a very ancient rhythm so slow that humans often forget it exists, yet strong enough to support all life we know. The Earth does not hurry. It does not need to prove anything. It does not try to become a fixed form. Over billions of years, this planet has learned in its own way that only systems capable of self-regulation last long enough to be called alive. It allows heat to flow outward rather than accumulate. It allows the crust to break so it can be renewed. It allows water and carbon to descend and return. It allows continents to collide and drift apart. It allows climate to change so life can learn to adapt. There is no resistance, no panic, only movement cycles and continuation. Carl Gustav Jung believed that at the deepest level of the human psyche, we long to return to an order larger than the ego, because the ego grows tired of controlling, predicting, and holding everything together. But the whole, whether psychological or planetary, does not strain. It operates through dynamic balance, through rhythms so deep that consciousness need not intervene. Perhaps that is why when you hear about the Earth's slow movements, your mind begins to soften. Not because you understand more, but because you remember something very old. A familiar sense that you do not need to tense yourself for the world to keep going. Right now, as you lie still, the Earth is continuing its work on your behalf. The plates are still drifting. Heat is still being released. Water and carbon are still circulating. Climate is still being regulated within deep limits. Nothing requires you to remain awake to supervise it. And just like the Earth, your body knows how to regulate itself. Your heart knows how to beat. Your lungs know how to breathe. Your nervous system knows how to shift from waking to rest. Sleep is not something you have to create. It arrives when you stop trying to control. Jung once said that sleep is the doorway from consciousness to the unconscious, where deeper forces take over. And the unconscious, like the Earth, is not as chaotic as we imagine. It has its own order, its own rhythm, its own way of healing without explanation. If today has been full of movement, many thoughts, many worries, many unfinished things, remember that not every movement needs an immediate conclusion. The Earth has never completed a state and then stopped. It simply continues very slowly, very evenly, very patiently. You are allowed to do the same. You do not need to resolve your entire life before sleeping. You do not need to fully understand the future. You do not need to hold everything together through willpower. You only need to allow yourself to be a very small part of a very large system, one that continues to support everything, even when you close your eyes. Let the final images of this story dissolve like rock melting into deep convection currents. Let the thought of drifting continents give way to the rhythm of your own breath. Let the mind release its need for control, just as the Earth has never needed a command center to remain alive. Tonight, you do not need to be completely still. You only need to drift very gently into sleep. And if there is one thing worth carrying into this night, it is this quiet trust. There are deeper systems caring for the world, and there are deeper systems caring for you. Now, you do not need to listen any further. You do not need to remember. You do not need to do anything at all. Just rest. Good night.